We told our daughter to keep the peace after her sister slept with her husband. Then she took our grandson, and we never saw either of them again. I used to think loyalty was something you owed to blood. No matter what blood did to you. I believed a family could survive almost anything, as long as everyone agreed to keep showing up at the same Thanksgiving table. I was wrong about that, the same way I was wrong about a lot of things, and I didn't understand how wrong until the morning my daughter Erin stood in my kitchen with a suitcase by the door and told me she was done. For us, the wrongness started with 2 words. Keep peace. That's what my husband Wallace and I told Erin, our oldest, after she found out her younger sister Brooke had been sleeping with her husband Scott for the better part of a year. I know how that sounds. There's no version of that sentence that comes out gentle. Brooke is younger than Erin by 3 years, and from the time she could walk, she was the kind of child people made room for. If she cried, somebody fixed it. If she broke something, somebody else got blamed first. Erin was the one who got told to be the bigger person, over and over, until being the bigger person basically became her whole personality. She was the responsible one, the one with the steady job at the credit union in Mississauga, the one who married young, had her son Adam, kept her receipts organized, called us every Sunday. Brooke moved through 3 different colleges, 2 failed business ideas Wallace and I quietly funded, and a string of boyfriends. We were never supposed to ask too many questions about. When Erin married Scott, I remember thinking finally, something's settled. Scott worked in logistics for a freight company out near the airport. Decent guy, a little quiet, the kind of son-in-law who fixed your eavesdrow without being asked. Adam came along 2 years later. For a while there, things were good, genuinely good. Then Brooke moved back from Calgary after her last relationship ended, and Erin, being Erin, offered to let her stay in the basement apartment of their house in Brampton until she got back on her feet. 6 weeks, that was the plan. It stretched into 5 months. I found out what had been happening the same way. Most mothers find out things they should have known long before, by accident. And far too late to stop it. It was a Tuesday in October. Erin called me from her car. And I could hear right away that something had cracked in her voice. That particular flatness people get when they're holding themselves together with both hands. She said, "Mom, I need you and Dad to come over. Now, don't bring Brooke." When Wallace and I got there, Erin was sitting at her kitchen table, with her phone face down in front of her, like she couldn't look at it anymore. Adam, who was 6, was upstairs watching cartoons. And Scott wasn't there. She said his name and then didn't say anything else for almost a full minute. "I found texts," she finally said, "on the family tablet." Scott's account was still logged in. Her hands were shaking around her mug. "It's been going on since March." I asked who, even though some part of me already knew, the way you know a storm is coming before the sky actually changes color. "Brooke," she said, and then she started laughing, this awful broken sound that had nothing funny in it at all. "My sister. In my own basement. I want to tell you that my first instinct was to put my arms around my daughter. It wasn't. My first instinct, God forgive me, was to think about how we were going to manage this, without anyone falling apart, without the family splitting too, without Christmas becoming a battlefield. I was already, in that very moment, doing the thing I'd done my whole life as a mother, managing Brooke's mess instead of sitting in Erin's pain. "Does Brooke know you know?" I asked. Erin looked at me like I'd slapped her. "That's your first question?" I tried to recover. I said something about needing to figure out the facts, before anyone did anything they couldn't take back. Wallace sat there rubbing his jaw, the way he does when he wants a conversation to be over, before it started. Erin told us the rest in pieces over the next hour. 7 months. Texts, photos, a hotel near the 401 they'd used at least 4 times that she could find proof of. Scott had been coming home late, telling her it was overtime. Brooke had been going to the gym on the same nights, leaving Adam with Erin so she could clear her head. The worst part, Erin said, wasn't even the betrayal itself. It was a message from Brooke to Scott that Erin read out loud to us in a voice gone completely flat. "I feel bad but not bad enough to stop. She's always been the lucky one anyway." The lucky one. Erin, who'd worked 2 jobs through nursing school, while Brooke partied through a business diploma she never finished. Erin, who'd quietly paid off a chunk of Brooke's credit card debt 2 years earlier, and never told anyone, including us. Erin, who had spent her whole life being told she was strong enough to handle whatever life threw at her, was apparently also strong enough to absorb this. Wallace and I should have called Brooke a monster that night, and meant it with our whole chests. Instead, what I did, mostly, because I was the one who picked up the phone first, was call her. She came over the next afternoon, defensive before she even sat down. Then she cried. Then she said it had only been physical, like that made it smaller. Then she said she'd tried to stop. Then she said something I will be ashamed of repeating for the rest of my life. I didn't think it would actually hurt her this much. Erin's always so put together. As if being put together meant you couldn't be destroyed. I should have driven straight back to Erin's that night, and told her we believed her, that Brooke was wrong, full stop, no asterisks. Instead, Wallace and I sat in our own kitchen and talked ourselves into a script. We told ourselves Adam needed both his mom and his aunt in his life without chaos around him. We told ourselves a public family war would scar him more than anything Brooke had done. We told ourselves, and this is the part that still makes me sick, that Erin was the strong one. So surely she could find a way through this without anyone losing anyone. 3 days later, we sat Erin down in our own living room and told her we needed to talk about how to move forward as a family. She looked at us like we were strangers wearing her parents' faces. We're not saying forgive right away, Wallace said, the way he always says hard things, carefully like he's diffusing something. But Brooke is still your certus. And Adam's going to grow up around her whether we like it or not. Family functions, holidays. We have to find a way to keep the peace. Keep the peace. Erin's mouth opened slightly, like the words had physically struck her. Keep the peace, she repeated, very quietly. She slept with my husband for 7 months in my own house, and you want me to keep the peace? I said. And I will hear myself saying this until the day I die. Nobody's saying it's okay, sweetheart. We just don't want this to tear the whole family apart. It already tore me apart, Erin said. You're asking me to smile through that so nobody else has to feel uncomfortable. I reached for her hand. She pulled it back like I'd burned her. You knew how Brooke gets away with things, Erin said, and now her voice wasn't loud. It was worse than loud. It was cold and exact. You knew, and instead of standing on my side for once in your life, you're already planning the seating chart for Christmas. Erin. No, she said. She stopped being my sister the day she decided I was someone she could do this to. And you two just stopped being my parents. She left that night and I told myself, the way parents like us always tell ourselves, that she'd cool off. That blood was a leash and eventually she'd come back to the end of it. She didn't answer our calls for 4 days. On the 5th, Scott called Wallace, not to apologize, but to ask, in this hollow defeated voice, whether we knew Erin had already met with a lawyer. By the end of that week, she'd filed for divorce, full custody of Adam, and, this detail still takes my breath away. A formal request that both be barred from any contact with her son without her direct, written permission. The court gave her almost everything she asked for. Scott didn't fight it, partly out of guilt. And partly because the text didn't leave him much ground to stand on. The last time I saw my grandson in our driveway, he had his winter coat zipped up wrong, one button off, the way 6-year-olds always do it, and a stuffed husky tucked under his arm, that he'd named Frosty. For reasons none of us ever fully understood. I came down the steps calling his name, and Erin stepped between us before I even reached the bottom. Don't, she said, not loud, just final. Erin, please. I just want to hug him. She shook her head. He doesn't need to be confused right now. I'm his grandmother. Something in her face went very still. And I was your daughter. Adam peeked around her leg. Why are we leaving, Mommy? Is Grandma mad at us? Erin crouched down to his level, voice gentle in a way that hurt worse than anger would have. No, baby, Grandma's just sad. Get in the car, okay? He did. He always did what she said. Kids trust the parent who's never lied to them. I reached for Erin's sleeve as she stood back up. She stepped back before I could touch her. Please don't take him from us, I said. You took yourselves out of this a long time ago, she said. I'm just making it official. Then she got in the car and drove away. And some part of me, even then, still believed it was temporary. That's the particular arrogance of parents who've spent 30 years assuming their children will always come back, no matter what you do to them, simply because they're yours. For the first few weeks, Wallace called it a phase. Brooke called it dramatic. I repeated both of those words to anyone who asked because the truth. That we had chosen Brooke's comfort over Erin's pain. Again, the way we always had was, Rossiter, more than I could carry out loud at. We tried everything that fall. Calls, texts, a card mailed to her old address that came back unopened. Erin had sold the house within 2 months and moved. We found out later, somewhere on the other side of the GTA, though the other side of the GTA could have meant anything from Oshawa to Hamilton, and we genuinely had no idea which. Her cell number stopped working. Her old co-workers at the credit union said she'd transferred branches but wouldn't say where. Adam's school confirmed, reluctantly, that he was no longer enrolled. She hadn't run away like someone in a panic. She'd left like someone closing a door. On purpose, methodically, room by room, until there was nothing left of us in her life to find. Months turned into a year. Brooke and Scott tried, in their fumbling, guilty way, to build something out of the wreckage. Though it never had the shape of anything good. They fought constantly. Scott drank more than he used to. Brooke would call me at odd hours, crying about how everyone treated her like a villain, how she'd already apologized. As though one apology should have been enough to erase 7 months of betrayal. And a child losing half his family overnight. We helped them anyway. Money for Scott's car repairs. Groceries when Brooke was between jobs again. We told ourselves it was just compassion. Deep down I knew it was the same old pattern, wearing a new coat. cleaning up after Brooke, calling it love. While our other daughter raised our grandson somewhere we weren't allowed to know about. The only proof Aaron was still Solakut, still out there somewhere, came once a year, on Adam's birthday. An envelope with no return address. Inside was a single photo. Never a letter. The first year he was missing a tooth, grinning on a dock somewhere with a fishing rod nearly as tall as he was. The next year, hockey gear, a gap-toothed smile under a helmet 2 sizes too big. By the 4th photo he had Aaron's eyes and somebody else's height, standing in front of mountains that didn't look like anything near southern Ontario. Out west somewhere. Maybe BC, maybe Alberta. We genuinely couldn't tell. That 4th photo broke something in Wallace. Not because Adam looked unhappy. Because he didn't. He looked like a kid who'd never once had to wonder if the adults around him were lying to him. Wallace sat at our kitchen table holding that photo for the better part of an hour. Then he said the truest thing either of us had said in years. We lost her. We actually lost her. His health started going not long after that. Nothing dramatic at first, just a kind of slowness that crept into him. Like his body had finally agreed with what the rest of him already knew. Then, on a Tuesday in late January, he had a mild stroke shoveling the driveway. One side of his face drooped for a few weeks. His speech came back slower than it used to be, more careful, like every word cost him something now. That was when he started asking. Quietly, late at night, holding his phone and scrolling old photos. Whether I thought Aaron would ever let him see Adam before he died. We hadn't earned the right to ask. We tried anyway. I spent an evening online doing what I should have done years earlier, with a clear head and an honest heart. Searching school sports rosters, local newspaper write-ups, anything public. I found a regional spelling bee result from a school district outside Kelowna, British Columbia. A name halfway down the list. Adam Whitlock. Whitlock had been Aaron's mother's maiden name, my own mother's name, which felt like both a wound and, somehow, a small mercy. She hadn't erased us completely. She'd just buried us under a name only I would recognize. I found a youth hockey roster next. A coach listed as E. Whitlock, assistant coach. There was a community newspaper photo, grainy but unmistakable. My daughter kneeling on a rink with a row of 10-year-olds in matching jerseys. One arm wrapped around Adam's shoulders. And she was laughing. Really laughing. The kind of laugh I hadn't heard out of her since before any of this happened. My first feeling, God help me, wasn't relief. It was jealousy. How dare she be happy without us? And then half a second later, the truer thought arrived right behind it. How dare we expect anything else? I printed that photo and brought it to Wallace, who cried the way he never let himself cry, quiet and ashamed of it. I need to see her before I'm not able to, he said. He wasn't actively dying then. But fear has a way of making people honest faster than anything else does. We argued for 2 days about whether to write to her at all. In the end, I was the one who put pen to paper. Because Wallace couldn't get through a single draft without rewriting it into an excuse. It took me 6 attempts before I had something true enough to send. Aaron, we were wrong. Not confused. Not doing our best under hard circumstances. Wrong. We protected Brooke because protecting her was easier than standing beside you in something this painful. We asked you to keep the peace. Because peace was more comfortable for us than your pain ever was. We do not deserve access to your life or Adam's. But if you are ever willing to hear from us even once, we will listen without defending ourselves. Mom. I mailed it to the Hockey Association, the only address I had, then I waited. 2 months. Nothing. Wallace's hope curdled slowly into bitterness, the way grief sometimes does in men who were never taught another way to carry it. She wants us to suffer, he said one night. No. I told him, and for the first time in our marriage I actually believed something I was saying more than he did. She wants to be left alone in peace. There's a difference. The letter came back 3 months after I sent mine. No return address. My name in Aaron's handwriting on the front. Careful and even. The same handwriting she'd had since she was a girl, carefully labeling her school binders. Mom. I got your letter. I believe you're sorry. I'm not sure you understand yet what you're actually sorry for. You didn't just lose a daughter and a grandson. I lost a husband, a sister, my parents, my home, my last name, and the family I thought I had. You had months to tell me the truth, before I found it on my own, and you chose to manage it instead. Then while I was sitting in your living room in pieces, you asked me to make it easier on everyone else. That's why I left. Not for revenge. Because I finally understood that if I stayed, Adam would learn exactly what I learned growing up. That love means absorbing harm quietly so nobody else has to feel uncomfortable. I won't teach him that. Don't come here. Don't contact his school. Don't reach out through anyone else we know. If I ever decide to talk to you, that will be my decision, not yours, Aaron. I read it twice, folded it, and set it on the table. Wallace read it after me, and I watched something in his face go from grief into anger. The fast, easy kind men reach for when guilt gets too heavy to hold honestly. So that's it? She gets to lecture us like we're criminals? I looked at my husband and, for the first time in 30-some years of marriage, I named out loud the thing I'd spent my whole life refusing to say. She's right, Wallace. She took our grandson. No, I said, and my voice was shaking but it didn't stop. We handed him to her with both hands. We just didn't realize that's what we were doing. That was the start of the end of his denial. Though it didn't happen all at once. He sulked for the better part of a week, but that letter stayed on our kitchen table for months, and I'd catch him reading it at odd hours. Over coffee. At midnight when he thought I was asleep. And something in him kept quietly cracking open a little more each time. One evening he said, out of nowhere, remember when Erin saved up for that car she wanted in high school? The little blue Civic? I did remember. She'd worked weekends at a drugstore for almost a year. Brooke had borrowed the jar of cash from Erin's closet, and spent most of it on a ski trip with friends, and when Erin found out, we'd made Brooke apologize, then told Erin not to make a scene because Brooke already felt terrible. She never got that car. Wallace said. I remembered all of it then, in one long sickening wave. Erin's sweet 16 that got quietly downsized because Brooke had a crisis that same week. Erin lending Brooke her car for just a few months that turned into 2 years. Erin being asked, more than once, to let Brooke stay with her between apartments. Only for things to go missing or get broken and never replaced. We hadn't caused what Brooke did to her marriage, but we had spent 25 years building the kind of household where Brooke believed someone else would always absorb the damage. And that someone had always been Erin. About 8 months after the letter, Brooke showed up at our door asking for money. She looked rough, thinner, dark circles. The smell of cigarettes she swore she'd quit clinging to her coat. She said Scott was threatening to take their dog and move to Ottawa for work. She said she needed first and last month's rent for a new place. She said nobody believed she'd actually changed. A year earlier I would have had my checkbook out before she finished the sentence. No, I said instead. She blinked at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. What? We're not giving you money, Brooke. Her face hardened in a way that reminded me painfully of her father's temper. So Erin finally got to you. Wallace stood up from his chair slower than he used to, but steadier than I expected. Don't you dare blame your sister. My sister? Brooke laughed, sharp and ugly. She abandoned this whole family. No, Wallace said. She escaped it. The room went silent in a way I'll never forget. Brooke left without another word that night, and I sat there finally understanding the difference between my 2 daughters. Erin had only ever asked us for honesty. Brooke had only ever asked us for rescue. The years moved differently after that, slower in the bad moments, faster in the in-between ones. Wallace's health kept declining in small steps. A fall on the back steps that fractured his wrist. Blood pressure that wouldn't behave no matter what the doctors tried. Brooke and Scott split for good somewhere in there. She moved back in with us for 4 temporary months that I no longer had the energy to resent the way I once would have. One cold morning in March. Almost 5 years after Erin left. Wallace collapsed in our front hallway. At the hospital, the cardiologist used the word weak about his heart. In a tone that made it clear weak wasn't a temporary condition. Wallace listened to all of it quietly, and when the doctor left the room, he turned to me and said, "Write to her again. She told us not to." I know. His eyes filled. I'm not asking her to forgive me. I just need her to know I'm sorry before I run out of chances to say it. So I wrote a second letter, this one dictated slowly from his hospital bed, stopping often to catch his breath. Erin, I failed you. I called it discipline when I was hard on you. And patience when I excused your sister. But the truth is I expected you to be strong because it was easier for me. When Brooke hurt you I let her, because holding her accountable would have meant admitting what kind of father I'd been the whole time. I'm ashamed of that now. You don't owe me anything, not a visit, not forgiveness, not even a reply. I just needed you to know that losing you was the thing that finally made me see myself clearly. I'm sorry, sweetheart, Dad. We mailed it the next morning. 3 weeks later Erin wrote back. Her letter to him was short. Dad, I read your letter. Thank you for saying that without asking me for anything in return. I hope you get stronger, Erin. Wallace held that piece of paper against his chest in his hospital bed and cried like I hadn't seen him cry since his own father's funeral. It wasn't forgiveness, but for a man running out of time it was enough to hold on to. Then came Adam's 11th birthday, and for the first time in 6 years no envelope arrived. I told myself the mail was slow. A week passed. Then 10 days. Wallace kept glancing toward the front window, every time the mail carrier's truck went by, trying not to let me see how much it cost him. On the 12th day, a thicker envelope finally arrived. Inside was a photo of Adam grinning beside a cake shaped like a hockey rink, and standing just behind him, next to Erin, was a man we'd never seen before. Tall, kind-faced, one hand resting lightly on Adam's shoulder, like it belonged there. On the back, in Erin's handwriting, Adam wanted you to have this one. Adam wanted, not Erin, our grandson who barely remembered us, had asked for us to be included in something. A few weeks after that, a small notice turned up in a Kelowna community paper. Wallace found through an old library archive search. Aaron marrying a man named Graham Reyes, a high school teacher, in a small backyard ceremony. Adam was listed as the one who walked his mother down the aisle. Wallace cried reading that, but it wasn't bitter crying this time. I'm glad, he said, voice breaking. I'm glad she's not alone out there. I felt something shift in me too that day. Not less grief exactly, but a different shape of it. Less anger, more acceptance. Erin wasn't living well to spite us. She was healing, somewhere far away from the people who'd hurt her. And healing, I was finally learning, doesn't owe anyone proximity to the ones who caused the wound. Wallace died 2 winters later quietly, in his sleep, on a Sunday in February. On his nightstand were his glasses, Erin's second letter, and that birthday photo of Adam and Graham. I called Brooke first, because that's the order things had always gone in our family, even now, she cried. But even in grief she found a way to make it about logistics. The will whether Erin would be told, whether she'd even bother showing up. Then I sat alone in our kitchen for almost an hour. Before I called the number Erin had used once, years earlier, to confirm she'd received Wallace's letter. She picked up on the 4th ring. Neither of us said anything for a moment. Erin, it's Mom. Silence on the line, long enough that I thought she might hang up. Your father passed away this morning. I heard her breath catch. When she finally spoke her voice was careful, guarded. I'm sorry. 2 words. Distant. More than I had any right to expect. I'm not asking you to come, I said. Another pause. Then quietly, thank you. I forced myself to keep going. He loved you, Erin. He knew what he did to you. He knew it before he died. I'm glad he knew. She said, and it hurt, but it was honest. And honest was more than we'd had in years. The funeral was small, held at a chapel not far from the house where the kids had grown up. Brooke arrived late with Scott trailing behind her. Both of them subdued, in a way I'd never seen from either of them before. And then, just as the service was ending, I looked toward the back of the chapel and saw her. Erin stood near the doors, older, her hair shorter than I remembered, a tall, gentle-looking man beside her, with his hand resting lightly at the small of her back. And beside them both, nearly as tall as her now, stood Adam, 13, in a dark blazer that didn't quite fit him yet, the way boys that age always look a little borrowed in formal clothes. My breath stopped. Brooke saw them too, and her face went pale. For one suspended moment, our whole broken family existed in the same room again. Brooke moved first, crossing the chapel with tears already streaking her face. Erin, please, I know I don't deserve. Erin's whole body went still. Adam's hand found hers without either of them seeming to think about it. I just want to say I'm sorry, Brooke said, properly, to your face. Dad's gone, can't we? Not doing anything, Brooke, Erin said, and her voice didn't rise at all. I'm just here for my dad. Brooke flinched like she'd been struck. I lost my whole family because of this. You threw it away, Erin said. There's a difference. Brooke wiped her face, glancing toward Adam. Can I at least say hi to him? Something hardened in Erin's expression. No, he's my son. He's not here to make you feel forgiven. Brooke broke down completely then, sobbing in a way that years ago would have had me crossing the room to comfort her without a second thought. This time, I stayed seated. Erin walked past her sister and came to a stead. I stood on legs that weren't entirely steady. Adam stayed close to her side, watching me with careful, guarded eyes. Not unkind, just unsure, the way you look at someone you've heard stories about but never actually met. Thank you for coming, I managed. She nodded once. Adam wanted to say goodbye to his grandfather. I looked at my grandson properly for the first time in 7 years. Hello, Adam? He glanced up at his mother first. She gave him a small, almost invisible nod. Hi, he said. His voice had dropped lower than I expected, somewhere between the boy in the birthday photos and the man he was becoming. There were 100 things as I wanted to say to him. I love you. I'm sorry. Do you remember any of this? I didn't say any of them, because I'd finally learned, far too late, that my feelings weren't his to carry. Instead I said, your grandfather kept every photo your mom ever sent. Every single one. Adam looked surprised. He did? He loved watching you grow up, even from far away. Something in his guarded eyes softened, just slightly. After the burial, Erin found me alone near the cars while Graham and Adam waited a respectful distance away. You handled that better than I expected, she said. I almost laughed through the tears that hadn't really stopped all day. I've had 7 years to learn one lesson. What's that? That love without honesty just turns into something selfish, wearing a nice outfit. She looked away for a moment. Then quietly, does Brooke know you stopped giving her money? She knows. Good. A pause. Does he know you and Dad protected her? My chest tightened. He knows the basics, that his aunt hurt me, that you and Dad made choices that made our house unsafe to stay in. He doesn't know everything. He's 13. Does he hate me? I asked before I could stop myself. Erin looked at me for a long moment. No, he just doesn't know you. That landed harder than hate ever could have. Hate at least means there's still a thread connecting two people. Not knowing someone means the thread already snapped a long time ago. I understand, I whispered. She studied my face like she was searching for some old, familiar resentment, and not finding it. Graham thinks people can actually change, if they're honest about what they did. He sounds like a good man. He is. A small real pause. I'm glad you found him. She nodded once, then reached into her coat pocket and held out a folded piece of paper. Adam wrote this before we drove out here. He wasn't sure he wanted to give it to you. My hands shook taking it. Should I read it now later, she said, and turned to go. Something close to panic rose in me, not the old grasping kind, something quieter. Aaron. She stopped. I'm proud of you, I said. I should have said that when you were 16. Working weekends for a car you never got to have. I should have said it on your wedding day. I should have said it the night you found those texts. I kept waiting for you to be fine on your own, instead of telling you that you didn't have to be. She didn't turn around, but she didn't walk away either. You weren't fine, I said, and you became someone good anyway. You became the kind of mother you deserve to have. Erin bowed her head for a second. Then without turning she said, "Goodbye, Mom," and walked back to her husband and son. I didn't chase her this time. I just watched the three of them get into their car and drive away. That night I opened Adam's letter alone. In my kitchen. The same kitchen, where Erin had once sat across from me trying to make me understand what her own sister had taken from her. Dear Grandma. Mom said I could decide if I wanted to write this. I don't remember much from when I was little. I remember your kitchen had a clock shaped like a sunflower. I remember Grandpa let me have 2 cookies when Mom said 1. I remember being confused when we moved. Mom never said bad things about you guys. She just said adults make choices that change everything, even when they don't mean to. I don't know if I want to visit yet. I don't know if Mom's ready for that either. But I wanted you to know I'm okay. Mom is a really good mom. Graham's nice too. I play hockey and I'm pretty good at math. I hope Grandpa knew I remembered him. Adam. I held that letter against my chest until the sun came up. Not because it promised me anything. It didn't. But because my grandson, the boy we'd lost through our own choices, not his, had handed me a small, honest piece of the truth, without any cruelty attached to it. I'm okay. Mom is a really good mom. That was the mercy. Not forgiveness. Mercy. In the months after the funeral, Erin and I exchanged a handful of careful emails. She told me Adam had made the rep hockey team. I told her I'd finally started seeing a counselor, something I should have done decades earlier. She said she was glad. I mentioned once, just once, that Brooke had asked about her. Erin didn't respond to that part of the email at all, and I learned not to bring it up again. One afternoon my counselor asked me what I actually wanted from my relationship with Erin. I started to say to be close again, and then stopped myself, because even that was still about me. So I told her the truer thing instead. I want her to never regret leaving us. That became the only prayer I had left. Not that she'd come back. Not that Adam would ever call me Grandma with any real warmth behind it. Just that the damage would end with our generation and go no further. Brooke never fully understood that. She spent a long while still blaming everyone but herself. Scott for tempting her, Erin for being too perfect to live with, us for not protecting her enough. Then one day her own son with Scott. They'd had a baby together not long after the affair came out. A boy named Carter asked her a question that apparently broke something open in her. He was 4, and he'd asked out of nowhere why his cousin Adam never came to visit. Brooke told me about it months later, during the first honest conversation we'd ever had as mother and daughter. She said, the question gutted her, realizing her own son, Ryosef, was already inheriting the shape of a story he hadn't even chosen to be born into. That was when Brooke finally went to therapy on her own. Not because we pushed her. Not because Erin had forgiven anything, but because watching that same old wound start to pass down to another child was the one thing she couldn't excuse her way out of. She didn't become a different person overnight. She still struggled. She still wanted forgiveness handed to her before she'd properly earned it. But she stopped asking us for money. She started paying her share of things without being asked twice. And one day she asked me, very quietly, for Erin's address. I said no. She got angry. Then for the first time in her life, she actually breathed through it instead of escalating, and said, "Oh, okay. I understand." That was the first boundary I'd ever seen Brooke accept, without trying to punish someone for setting it. Maybe there was something there worth hoping for, eventually, but hope for Brooke never meant access to Erin's life. That distinction took me far too long to understand, and I made sure I never confused the two again. 3 years after Wallace died, Adam turned 16. A photo arrived as it always did, this time with a short note in Erin's handwriting on the back. He got his G1. Pray for me. In the photo Adam stood proudly beside an old gray Corolla. Erin pretending to look terrified beside him. Graham laughing in the background. I laughed and cried at the exact same time, holding that photo at my kitchen table. Later that year, my phone rang on a Thursday evening while I was doing dishes, and Erin's name came up on the screen. I nearly dropped the plate I was holding. Hello? Hi, Mom. That word, after everything. Mom, hi Erin, I managed. Adam's got a tournament next month. It's a few hours from you. Out near Calgary. I stayed quiet. almost afraid that speaking would make whatever was happening stop. He asked if you might want to come watch one game, she said. I would love that, I said before she'd even finished. There are contingents. Anything. You come alone. You don't tell Brooke. You don't introduce yourself to anyone as his grandmother unless he does it first. If he seems overwhelmed at any point, we're done for the day. If I say it's over, it's over. Yes, I said immediately. I mean it, I know you do. And Mom? Yes, this isn't a reunion. My chest ached, but I understood exactly what she meant. I know. It's one game. One game is more than I've earned. There was a long pause. Then quietly, she said, that's exactly why I'm considering it. The tournament was held in a cold rink on the outskirts of Calgary on a gray Saturday in February. I sat near the top of the bleachers, hands knotted in my lap, and when Adam skated out for warm-ups, I recognized him instantly. Not from the photos but from the way he moved, focused and steady, exactly like his mother used to look, chasing down everything life threw at her. Erin saw me before he did. She gave one small nod from across the rink. Graham smiled, polite and careful. I didn't shout too loudly during the game. I didn't cry where anyone could see. I just sat there and watched my grandson play hockey under fluorescent lights, feeling the strange, humbling privilege of being allowed to witness something I had absolutely no right to demand. After the game, Adam walked over, with Erin a few steps behind him, his cheeks flushed from the ice. Hi, he said. Hi, I said back. You played really well out there. He gave a small shy smile. Thanks. An awkward silence settled between us. Then I remembered the small container in my bag. I brought something, only if it's okay. I held it out. Inside was a batch of butter tarts. The recipe his grandfather used to make every December, the one thing Wallace had actually been proud of in the kitchen. Adam looked at the container, then up at his mother. Erin nodded, just barely. His face broke into a real smile. The first one I'd seen all day. Grandpa used to make these, right? Mom told me about them once. He did, I said, my voice catching. Every Christmas. We sat at a picnic table near the rink for 20 minutes, no more. We talked about hockey, about school, about a math competition he was nervous for. Not about Brooke. Not about Wallace's funeral. Not about any of the years we'd lost. When it was time to go, Adam hugged me, quick and a little stiff but real. I let him pull away first. I didn't hold on a second longer than he wanted me to. Walking back toward the parking lot, Erin stopped beside me for a moment. You did well today, she said. It was such a small sentence. From her, after everything, it felt like the closest thing to grace I'd ever been given. I couldn't say anything back. I just nodded, because my throat wouldn't let me do anything else. Years have passed since that cold rink in Calgary. My relationship with Erin isn't what I once imagined a mother-daughter relationship should look like. She doesn't call every week. Adam doesn't spend Christmas at my house. Graham is kind to me but careful. The way you're careful around something you don't fully trust yet. And Brooke has never once been allowed anywhere near Erin's life again. That boundary, I understand now, may be permanent. And I've stopped asking when it might change. Sometimes people hear pieces of this story and tell me, gently, that family is supposed to forgive. I used to believe that too. Now I understand that forgiveness isn't something you're owed just because you're related to someone. And it isn't something you get to demand on behalf of the person who caused the harm, so that everyone else can feel more comfortable. Forgiveness, if it ever comes, belongs entirely to the person who was hurt. And sometimes the kindest thing a parent can do is accept that their child's peace requires real distance from them. I regret what we did every single day. I regret the silence we kept for months, while Erin's marriage quietly fell apart in front of us. I regret looking at her pain and immediately calculating how to protect Brooke from the consequences of it. I regret saying keep the peace, when what I should have said, the only thing that night actually called for, was simply this.
I'm on your side. That was all Erin needed from us.
Not a plan. Not a lecture about family. Just one honest sentence. We didn't give it to her, so she chose a side on her own. She chose her son. She chose her own peace. She chose a life where betrayal didn't get dressed up as family loyalty. Now, when I look at the most recent photo on my mantle, I see Adam standing beside Erin at his high school graduation. Graham next to them, all three of them, grinning in a way that doesn't owe me anything. Adam is holding his diploma in one hand and, because it became our small strange tradition, a tin of butter tarts in the other. On the back, in his handwriting now, instead of hers, it says, "Thanks for coming, Grandma." Grandma. That word still undoes me every time. Not because it means everything was fixed. It wasn't. Some chairs stay empty for good. Some apologies arrive too late to rebuild what they were meant to repair. Wallace never got the reunion he was hoping for. Erin never got the parents she needed on the night she needed them most. Adam never got a childhood where both sides of his family could sit in the same room, without history sitting heavy in the air between them. And me? I never got back the years I lost. But I got the truth, eventually, and the truth, as painful as it was, gave me one last chance to stop doing harm. So if you're a parent listening to this, and one of your children has hurt another one badly, Don't ask the one who was wounded to keep smiling. The family stays comfortable. Don't call their boundaries cruelty. Don't mistake their silence for disrespect. Don't tell them to keep the peace, just because honesty would make your life harder. Because one day, they might do exactly what my daughter did. They might keep the peace. Finally, the only way that was ever actually going to work. By leaving. And taking it with them.